Hi, I'm Lorena Hoeber, the host of the Grad Student Life podcast, where we feature the experiences and insights from graduate students in KHS who've either recently finished or are currently in the program, just to get a sense of what it's like to be a grad student in our faculty. So today we have Kristen Plandowski, who recently finished her MSc, I think it was in December, if that was correct. Yep. All right, so welcome to the podcast.
Hello.
All right. So what I want to do first is to get a bit of an overview of what your research project was about and who did you work with? Who was your supervisor?
Okay, so I looked at the neurophysiological mechanisms of dual tasking in people with MS, multiple sclerosis, and compared that with control participants. And my supervisor was Dr. Cameron Mang. Highly recommend.
Perfect. Well, maybe let's go there. Why would you recommend Cam?
It was a fantastic experience, especially starting out basically right when COVID hit.
Yeah, right.
And his guidance and flexibility. And I also had a co-supervisor at the U of S, Dr. Sarah Donkers, and she was fantastic as well. But he really helped maneuver my way through the entire program and was cognizant of the fact that I wasn't always in Regina and was really aware that life happens.
Yeah.
And gave me the flexibility to really excel with my projects. So.
Okay, so we're going to come back to a couple of these things, but maybe I want to start off with why were you interested in this topic?
So my auntie was diagnosed with Huntington's disease, and she just passed away 2 years ago, and we found out that my cousin actually has it. And so originally when I finished my degree, my undergrad, I really wanted to learn more about neurological populations and to be able to help just with that specific kind of population of people. And Huntington's disease is a very kind of rare niche disease. And so doing any research specifically with them would be really difficult, especially with a master's.
Yeah.
And Cam was already doing work with people with MS, and as was Sarah. And so that was kind of their niche area, and I figured that would be a really good way to also kind of get into it. So
Right. So some of this is the challenges of recruiting that you might have had a more specific interest, but it would have been difficult to get perhaps a sample size that you could have used for this. So something similar, but not exactly.
Yeah,
the
exactly.
Same. Okay. So what did you find from your research?
Well, we had a lot of data.
Yeah.
But we found that people with MS are basically able to function the same at the same level during dual tasking. So
can you explain what is dual tasking?
So it's basically doing two things at once.
Okay, perfect.
So we do it all the time. Whether that's driving and trying to look at your GPS, don't do that. But what I did was I had people recall number letter sequences, and I had people foot tap while holding a pinch grip. And specifically, we used transcranial magnetic stimulation to look at the cortico-spinal excitability of the nervous system.
Okay.
And so, we were able to see that people with MS were functioning with their performance pretty much the same as our control participants. But what was going on neurologically was actually quite different. So we found that their cortical silent period was actually quite longer than control participants, and that changed a lot more in dual tasking compared to single tasks.
And so what does that mean, when, again, I'm going to forget the phrase, but when it goes silent, what does that mean?
It basically means that it's taking longer.
Okay.
Yeah, for you to
signals?
Okay. Yeah. And that's the easiest way to put it.
Okay.
So it was actually really interesting that even though they were doing the same thing, it was taking more for them to be able to do it.
Okay.
And so it was a question of whether it's masking potentially, and also if it's compensatory or compensation.
Okay.
I'd love to do more work on it.
Okay. So based on what you found, how does this help maybe people with MS or people that work with people with MS? What can they learn from it?
So it was an exploratory study in the sense that there actually wasn't anybody else, other literature out there that has studied dual tasking with the usage of TMS in this population with control participants. So it's kind of just building right now.
Okay.
But hopefully, like we've seen that the corticospinal excitability can actually kind of be a pathway to improving function as well in people with MS. So if we're able to target certain therapies and rehabs that increase or shorten our cortical silent period and really kind of target that area, that would be really huge for rehab professionals.
So it's kind of like the idea that we could perhaps train it and maybe make the signal go faster.
Yeah.
Okay, that's very exciting. So you've mentioned a couple times about the TMS. Can you explain just a little bit about what the TMS is and how you used it for your project?
So TMS is transcranial magnetic stimulation.
Yeah.
It's basically this really fun tool that we use to stimulate somebody's head.
Yeah.
It feels like a bop. Some people say it's a hard bop, but it really depends.
Yeah.
I cranked it way up on mine, so sorry, participants. But to look at the cortical silent period, we have to increase it a lot to like 145, 155%.
Okay.
And so it can feel quite hard, but essentially it sends like a little signal to the brain, and then that's how we can see that cortical silent period.
Okay.
So
well, that's just it's one of those things that not everyone would know what that is. So it's just kind of
and even when you explain it, people look at you like,
sure, yes,
okay, I'm sure you did.
Well, I think that's a lot of what happens in research. We use different tools that are not very familiar with the public, but are still. It's critical to what you actually had to do. So I want to move into a little bit of kind of the pathway to get done, because I think there's sometimes a sense that you come in as a grad student, you're going to finish in 2 years. That's kind of what's expected. I know. But it doesn't always happen for lots of different reasons, and that's not a bad thing. But now looking back, what were some of maybe the challenges that you faced in getting done? But maybe what were some of the things that were I don't want to say easier, but kind of you enjoyed that, and that was sort of part of the interesting part.
Yeah, for sure, COVID. COVID really threw a wrench in things, especially with the population I was working with, because a lot of the neurological populations were still considered vulnerable. And so even when we could get like a control participant to come in, a person with MS didn't feel as comfortable.
Right. Yeah.
And so recruitment in general was a huge challenge for me, even after COVID. And part of it was because my protocol was 3 hours long.
Okay, yeah.
And people with MS especially, like, they get tired easier.
Yeah.
And transit, like finding a way to get here, get home, it's tough. And so that was a bit of a challenge. And then also, like, just everything kind of starting to pick back up after COVID also was difficult because like lots of people didn't feel comfortable going out, which was unfortunate. But I am not mad that it didn't take me 2 years to finish, to be honest. I felt like I was able to learn a lot more in that time. This might sound bad, but I never went into my master's just to pursue the degree.
Right.
I probably could have went off and worked without the degree.
Okay.
But I felt like when I finished my undergrad, I didn't have the tools and knowledge that I really needed to do what I wanted to do. And so having that extra time to really kind of explore the different methods and techniques, I had the opportunity to work with another professor on a project, which was very different than mine. So I really enjoyed the experience, even though it did take longer than expected. But I think kind of everybody during this COVID era has kind of, especially if you're working with like people, it's been tough. So.
So I think there's two things. One of them is that idea that I think what I hear from you is that that journey was actually really enjoyable, and that it's not just the end point about getting the degree, but about learning, as you just said, lots of different techniques, but getting involved in another project. So I think that's nice to hear that sometimes if it takes you a little bit longer, you actually benefit more from it, from doing extra things.
For sure. Yeah. I think you have to have that mindset though.
Yeah.
Like life, like I said, life happens.
Yeah.
I had like a lot of different things coming at me in that time. And so especially Cam and Sarah kind of giving me the grace to take my time with a couple things, but also being like, hey, Kristen, let's go.
Well, I think there is, and I think that's a really good point to make, that there is, as a supervisor or supervisors, there's a bit of a flex that always has to happen. I think that's really important, but also at the same time, we're also there to make sure you do get done.
Yes.
So sometimes it's a kick in the butt, sometimes it's a gentle nudge, or 3 or whatever.
4,
but there's a balance that needs to happen to expect from that. The other thing I think that was important, I'm glad that you talked about too, is that in our faculty we deal with people, and that's why we're here in all different types of settings. But that is also the challenge of doing research, because it's with people.
Yeah.
And it's not always just about you. It's about, are they comfortable? Can they get onto campus? Again, you're right. COVID was really difficult for our faculty because we couldn't do anything within here. So it's a double-edged sword.
For sure. Yeah. And especially with, and I know a lot of the faculty works with different populations, and neurological populations are, it's really tough for them. And this is kind of like, Saskatchewan has one of the highest rates of MS in the world.
Yeah.
And the highest in Canada.
Yeah.
And we're so sparsely populated in Saskatchewan that we're also missing huge chunks of people that are in those rural areas. Yeah. And so even if you have a certain number of people in Regina, getting here is tough. They might have already participated in research. Yeah. A lot of the keeners have done it, and or they're in our Enrich program. Yeah. Highly recommend. Everybody look it up. So a lot of people are already involved that want to be involved. And so also reaching people is tough.
But I think that's an interesting point. I know you and I have chatted about this before, about getting to people that live in rural environments, and whether that's treatment or rehab, but also I think it's an important part about research, and that and I don't have solutions. We're not going to get that, but the difficulty of how do we get our research to people or with people that are in some of these rural areas? And I don't know that I have an answer to that, but it's an unfortunate thing that we're missing.
Yeah. And hopefully what I'm planning on doing with my degree is rural and remote neuro rehab. Yeah. So maybe at some point I'll be able to partner with a research organization to actually bring in some of that data that I'm working with. But that's kind of the goal. But yeah, it's tough. Especially when the majority of our neuro rehab programs, which there aren't many, right, are in Saskatoon and Regina.
Yeah. So if you're in a small town, if you're on the farm, if you're someplace else, that's the onus is on you to get to those 100%. Places. 100%.
Yeah. And people don't even know.
Right. Yeah. So that's another challenge, is how do we get that knowledge out to them? Yeah. That some of these things might exist. So it's an unfortunate part about this, but hopefully, again, maybe as you just said, that could be something that you do.
It's a stepping stone. Yeah. Everything's a stepping stone.
That is. Okay. That's awesome. So I want to go into a little bit about some of your experiences as a graduate student. So one of them you just mentioned earlier too is this idea that you weren't always in Regina. So can you explain a little bit about that, and how maybe what some of the challenges are that were with that, about not always being here?
Yeah, for sure. So I actually started my grad degree a little bit later, because I started my undergrad in Kelowna. Okay. And so I transferred, not everything transferred. Yeah. And so I started my degree a little bit later, and I wasn't 20, living, being able to live full time in Regina, and then COVID hit. Yeah. And so I was actually back home in a smaller town. And then, so that was 2.5 years. And then it was hard to find another place here. And it made more sense that I was done all of my coursework. Yeah. And I really only had to be in the lab when I had a participant coming in. And which was also not ideal, because if I came up for the day
Mm-hmm.
to do research and then like somebody would maybe cancel and things
yeah.
like that, right? Which like totally
Yeah.
don't blame people.
No,
It's
no.
3 hours,
Yeah.
it's a long time.
Yeah.
But like being here would have been more convenient in the sense that like if somebody would have said, yeah, I can hop in tomorrow,
Right. Yeah.
then
Yeah.
perfect. So that was a little bit of a challenge, but one of the good things that came from COVID was everybody really learned how to communicate better virtually.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had tons of Zoom meetings.
Yeah.
Still not a fan of Zoom.
No, but it's a tool.
But it worked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think in some ways what we can learn from yours is this idea that there's a part of time where you do have to be here for classes, although I think we did have some Zoom ones at that time. But there is a possibility to do research and not always be here physically, but it requires some compromises on your part of having to come in. And as you said, sometimes people cancel, but it's a bit of that not being here, but when you do, there may be some difficulties. Yeah.
And like with my auntie and my cousin now, being home is a huge benefit in that sense.
Yeah.
That I can help out a little bit more. And so that was really tough going through that as well.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, especially students, like everybody goes through stuff.
Oh, yes.
And knowing that you need to tell your supervisor when you're going through something. And instead of just ignoring emails and like letting stuff pile up, like you need to communicate that even though it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because they understand. They'll give you that grace. They'll give you the tools that you need and they'll give you that time. So
I think that's really important advice because as much as I think supervisors they're looking out for, they want to help students, but they don't always know. And they're not always going to ask, how are you today? What's going on? And you might give them more basic answers to that. But I think it is really important if it's a health issue, if it's a family issue, that it's okay to say that.
for sure.
But recognize that they're going to help you out. That's part of it. That's part of their job.
Yeah, like
is
they're
to
not
do
going to say, sucks to suck, do your work.
No. But I also think if you don't tell them, they don't always know.
100%.
And you're right, like the ghosting, the not responding to things, they don't know what to make of that.
No, and I think that's like a huge kind of issue with like after the COVID with everything being so technology based was it gave people the opportunity to kind of ghost.
Right. Yeah.
And I think when you're growing up and like you're kind of moving through that 18 plus stage, like you really need to learn like the tools to communicate.
Yeah.
Even when you think that it's going to look bad or something like that. Like you need to tell people.
Yeah. Because you don't know too what the response is going to be like. And I think we fear that sometimes.
For sure.
Of what's going to happen. And again, to be fair, you don't know. But I think if you don't share it, either people are going to fill in the blanks or perhaps they're just going to stop wondering about you.
Yeah.
And I think we don't want that.
No.
We don't want that.
Like 100% ghosting is the worst option. Don't do it.
It's a very good point. That is excellent. So going back to first year, Kristen, coming into the graduate program, what advice would you give yourself?
Oh boy. Give yourself the opportunity to grow in your mind because you, like for me, I came in thinking like, oh my gosh, I can't send this to Cam yet. This draft, like it's not good enough. Oh my gosh. And then by the end of it, I'm like, well, here's 3 sentences. Hope you like it. Like you really gotta, you're never going to be perfect. Nothing's going to be perfect enough to send. And if you're waiting for it to be perfect to send, you're going to be waiting a long time.
I'm glad that you said that because I think it is very difficult to convince students that it's okay to send it in lots of different types of drafts. Don't be embarrassed about it. Again, believe me, as a supervisor, I've seen all kinds. We get it.
Oh, for sure. And it's almost better like to send 3 sentences and be like, I am working on this.
Yes.
And then the next day send 2 paragraphs
Right.
and be like, don't even look at it yet. I just want to show you that I did something.
Yeah.
So.
But I think it is a common thing that I see is that students are waiting to send the most polished and it's perfect. And again, I appreciate that you said this because I think an important part about grad school is that the learning never stops. So there never is a perfect. It does not happen.
No.
And you got to be okay with that.
For sure. Like I was reading parts of my thesis the other day and I was like, probably could have changed that. But like, that's the best version of what you could do in that moment.
Exactly.
And I think that's really important.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And again, sometimes, and there's also the draft period. The draft period is we recognize this is not polished. It's a starting point, but it's okay to let it go. You have to let it go. If you don't, again, your supervisor's going to wonder what's going on. Have you worked on anything? So.
Well, and you're not here to do it alone.
No.
Like you're not here to like write this thesis and do the research on your own.
No.
Like you need to be sending stuff to your supervisors so that they can guide you, which is like their role.
It is.
So
it is.
if you're not letting them guide you, like that's not really ideal.
It is. That's such a good point. That is our job. We understand that's our job, and that's what we're here for. So you have to be part of it, and that's this grad student's part is to let it go.
For sure.
And prepared to get the feedback.
Yeah. And I promise the feedback is never as bad as you think it's going to be. Like for every 5 bad comments, there's a good one in there.
Yeah.
Like.
Well, and I think the other part is to say that the feedback is there to help you.
Oh, for sure.
So it may look like, oh, I worked so hard on that paragraph or that sentence, but it's not meant to cut people down. It's meant to go, this is how you can get it better.
Yeah. Like I remember one email I got from either Sarah or Cam. They were like, okay, it's going to look like a lot of red, but like I'm just moving stuff around.
Yeah.
And I like saw it and it's just red. And I'm like, okay.
Well, and I think the other challenge is that this is very different than an undergrad where we often don't have the time to give that much feedback. So you're not prepared for it. And then when you come into grad school, it is a big jump for the amount and the volume and the nitpickiness that happens.
And I mean, starting my grad at an older age did help me in that sense because I have been working part-time and doing work for how long. So like I had professional expectations in the sense that like I knew critical feedback wasn't critical on me.
Right.
It was just critical to do better.
Right.
So,
okay. Yeah, that's a nice way to put that.
Which, you got to remember.
But you have to get used to it. Yeah. And you have to understand what that feedback is and why they're doing it. And again, it's not
personal.
No, it's not personal, but it's always in an effort to make things better, clearer, more accurate, whatever it might be. That's the point of it. But it's there to help you out and not for the supervisors to write it. That's not their job.
No.
It's again to give you that guidance.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So if you, for like new students that were coming in, what advice would you give to them about, and it could be about either working with CAM, it could be working from afar, it could be getting done. Like it's open, whatever. Because I think sometimes coming in, there's so much unknown about what grad school is like. How do you finish? What are the expectations? So now you're done. You kind of have that.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, exactly.
Finally.
But that's a nice thing. Again, what kind of, for someone that's coming in, what would be helpful for them?
First of all, supervisor-wise, find somebody whose work you're really interested in.
Yeah.
And find somebody that kind of meshes with your... not just like academic style, but also like your personality and work style.
Yeah.
Because if you're you're wanting to work with somebody who you maybe don't get along with as well personally, that's probably not going to be fun.
Probably not.
Like that's going to be a long couple of years.
Yeah.
So definitely do your research.
Right.
Like
and
before.
How do you do that? Like, because I think we say that, but how would you tell students do your research?
So
what would you do?
I knew basically after I took Cam's first class, I was like, if I decide to continue my school, I'm going to try and get in with Cam.
So having that exposure to them. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's a really good place to start, especially if you're considering grad school at the same institution.
Right.
If not, it would be a really good idea to talk to even some of the professors that are in the area that you'd like, because like they have co-authors, they've done research at other universities, like they could give you a good place to start. And then you got to reach out, and don't reach out in a general hey, do you want to advise me? Like actually look into what they're doing and know that that's where you'd want to be and tell them that. So that would be the first point. Second point would be you need to be like a self-starter. Like people aren't going to do your work for you.
No.
Like that would be great, but they're not going to do your work for you. And so you need to sit down and actually give yourself timelines. Like Sarah hammered this home to me for probably like the first year and a half before I actually like kind of got it through my head that even if you write in your calendar, have 3 paragraphs done by next Wednesday, that at least gives you a deadline, a soft deadline. That's a hard deadline on paper. And so that's really helpful, especially when you're not in like a course where it's like you have an assignment due in 2 weeks, you need to do X amount of reading. So, and that's the other thing, get prepared to read.
It's true. Yes.
Also, use like Mendeley or something, because you do not want to be sifting through 250 PDFs of research later on. Like put it in an organization kind of tool. You will thank yourself later.
Oh, for sure. And these are things, if you learn that now, it's better. And I'm just going to go back to that point about the deadlines, because I know I tell students this all the time, but grad school, once you're done courses, it's very independent. There's not a lot of structure to it. And you do have to give yourself arbitrary deadlines, because if you don't, there is no deadline.
No.
And there's nothing to work towards.
No.
Besides the idea of like your clock running out and you can't do that anymore. And that's a challenge.
For sure. And like I finished my coursework, I think in the first like year or something. So after that, like it was no courses. It was literally just, let's read research all day and sift through it and be like, oh my gosh, this is on rats. Like I don't need to be reading rats. Like, so it was, you really need to also love what you're researching. Like you have to have a passion for what you're wanting to look at, or else you're not going to have that motivation to keep going.
Because it's so difficult when it is unstructured and there isn't timelines. And you're right, like you're going to have these days where this is all you do, that you're reading about something. And if it's not something that you don't like, why would you do it?
For sure. And I think that's also like a misconception about grad school, is that you just hop in to a project that your supervisor's already doing. And so you don't really have any flexibility or choice in kind of individualizing what you're wanting to do. But like, at least with my experience, Cam and Sarah, they were maybe like a little bit, okay, this isn't a master's project. This is like a dissertation. But like for the most part, they let me free reign, design it myself, as long as it was like within the scope of what we could do. And so it was really my baby. And I think a lot of people think that you kind of just hop in and do whatever a supervisor's already doing. But you do have some choice, I think, for the most part, with most supervisors.
I think that there are sometimes that happens, and that has its own benefits because it has a structure and guidance already, but it could have drawbacks in that it may not be something that you're interested in. But I think what you're talking about is that idea of it fits and it aligns with your supervisors, but you get to control it, you get to direct it. And they're there to make sure it's reasonable and it's feasible and you're going to get done. So that's kind of exciting because it's something that you own, you feel personally connected to.
It's your baby.
I know, that's awesome. Do you have anything else that you think you want to share about what your experiences were like as a grad student, or anything else that I maybe has missed?
I would say make the most of the time that you have. You're not going to be in school forever.
Yeah.
Bless. But like I said before, I had the opportunity to hop in with Dr. Gino's project, and it's very qualitative. It's very different than mine. Yeah. But I went to a research conference last year. I'm going to another one with them this year, and it also gave me a really good way to think about things in a different lens, and it very useful even for my research. So reach out. Like if, especially like I took a course with Rebecca in my first year of grad. And that's how we kind of connected. And then I was able to start helping out. And the more things you can experience, like you might decide that you want to go in a completely different, different direction when you're done. Like you might be thinking that you're more clinical based, and then you're like, huh, okay, I kind of like this way better. And so really make the most out of your time.
Yeah, and I like that idea of opening yourself up to maybe working at a side project. I know you got to focus on yours, but side projects, and maybe discovering things that, as you said with Dr. Janot, that it's a different kind of methodology that she uses that would not be typical with CAM, but it kind of opens up something, a new opportunity maybe for you.
And it was really challenging. Like doing data analysis with her project, because I'm like, different. Where are the numbers?
No, there's no numbers.
But I felt like that really helped me grow as well, to like look at things from different perspectives and to think about things more person-centric. And also apply for scholarships.
Oh, that's a good one too.
Do it. Because like there's money to give. Take the money.
You're absolutely right that sometimes we have people or they don't apply, and sometimes we can't give out scholarships. So I always see this as it's a little bit of work, but the value you get from it is worth it.
For sure. And like there's tons of external
there are
funding as well. Like I was lucky enough to receive a skipper grant in my first year for also like a completely different project that I did. That wasn't my thesis. But side note. And and it was awesome. Like and I was able to kind of use that grant application as a tool for conference application, like things like that. Like it's a good template to kind of have. And it also gets you thinking about how to describe your research. Which is tough.
I like that sort of comment in the end, because I think sometimes we get so immersed in it and it's difficult to explain to other people. But the more you work at that, the more it becomes easier to translate it to different groups. And it's a skill that we have to work on.
Like as soon as you can explain to your grandma and grandpa what you're doing without them just like blank staring, that's when you know that you know.
Yes, absolutely. And it is, everyone can understand research. Everybody can, but it takes a little bit of work to figure out how to go from perhaps jargon or concepts that are very specific and unique to explaining it so that they understand just basically what you're doing.
The whole point of research is to bring it into the real world. So if it's so niche in a little article and you can't actually use it and tell people what you're doing, kind of what's the point, right? So
that's in some ways such a nice way to wrap this up, of kind of that idea of, have this passion for what you're doing, but also understand what it means for other people and how to explain it. Because again, it takes it from this little thing to connecting it to the world, connecting it to other people. That's a nice way to do that.
Always thinking about what's next. And especially when you're done your degree, like what's next?
Well, thank you very much, Kristen, for coming in today.
No, thank you.
All right. Okay.